Hi, everybody. Good morning from downtown Cleveland. My name is Mike Sutten. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Innovaccer. If you're not familiar with Innovaccer, we're a clinical and healthcare data management company. And in context of the FHIR DevDays, we're specifically oriented to make sure that that payload, that data you're putting in those FHIR messages is trustworthy, of high quality, and probably most importantly, has been unified to a single identity to prevent the wrong data going to the wrong person. A little bit on my background. Like I said, my name's Mike. I've been in the data business for many years in many different industries. Most recently, before joining Innovaccer, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Kaiser Permanente. I helped Kaiser in their move to the cloud. Prior to that, I was the Deputy CIO at the Central Intelligence Agency, believe it or not, which, as you might suspect, has a massive data opportunity, and help take them to the cloud, actually, to help deal with some of their massive data management issues. But probably the most interesting, perhaps, and pertinent to this discussion, I used to work for the cruise lines during the turn of the century. Can't believe I'm saying that, but with the movement of the Open Travel Alliance. And just to draw a parallel on that, and what I experienced during that time is I'm seeing happening in healthcare. And as you all know, the travel business has been transformed by the move to consumerization and self-service data, self-service bookings, self-service transactions. And back then, in the early 2000s, that's exactly how we started. We started with a small set of APIs that the industries, the cruise lines, the hotels, the rental car agencies, the airlines, slowly but surely adopted, and it transformed the entire industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we did at Innovaccer. Is we commissioned a study. I'm sorry. So what I was talking about is making sure that that payload data in your API messages are accurate. This is one of the cartoons one of our folks came up with. And if you talk about consumerization in the healthcare business, generally, what is the first thing when you walk up to an admissions desk? You get the question is, what is your birth date? It could be a pharmacy as well. We don't think that is the consumer centricity that we are really looking for as a patient experience as we evolved. So we've kind of coined the term, many people have, of digital readiness. And specifically, and where Innovaccer's prime focus is on making sure that data is ready so this digital experience can transform from you being recognized as your birth date to having them have good, full longitudinal information about you. And so in the study I mentioned, we used a service called Morning Consult to help us do a survey of somewhere between 70 to 80 chief officers, whether it's in the digital space, the financial space, or the CIOs. And we were asking, what are their plans in this area? And huge number, statistically significant number of the healthcare executives, 95% said they are focused on digital transformation, meaning they don't want the birth date to be the primary key when they're meeting a patient or a consumer in their practices. And as technologists, as we take that challenge from the healthcare executives, the question becomes, are we ready for this? I mean, certainly interoperability is in the early days with the acceptance and the adoption of the HL7 FHIR standard, but they are not ready to be able to present this data in a fashion to that consumer that has the same reliability that you would get whether you're using a financial application or a travel application or one of those. And so we kind of coined the term data readiness crisis. And it's on us as technologists in this space to push this, and so we can get the interoperability that HL7 is promising us with the FHIR. So about half the folks in these organizations said that part of their data readiness issue is that their data is still not organized. It is highly fragmented, it is siloed, And really, since I've been part of this for the last 8 years in the healthcare space, we as the technology group have been responding to how do we make these systems that we buy to solve a particular problem interoperate with each other. And so to me, it's been yeoman's work by the IT staffs to make this data connect, but it wasn't with the basis of a platform in order to organize and move this data. So we created silos to solve the business needs. And so 74%, when we talk about now, let's get this data ready, 74% of the folks said, I need to get my data organized around clinical and claims data. Of course, that's the foundation of anyone in the healthcare space. And then 42%, kind of repeating what that is they said that data is fragmented and siloed in many different applications, many different transactional systems, because there's multiple EMRs in healthcare spaces. There's multiple analytic environments in these spaces, many data warehouses. And then the last one, and with no offense to the EHR vendors, they've done a fabulous job in the digitization of all the transactional records and of the encounters and the claims. Fabulous work. But in what industry is the transactional system also the analytic environment that provides the intelligence on this? So 58% believe that their EHR is probably not the best solution to handle their analytic needs and their data distribution needs. Whoops. So what we have done at Innovaccer is we absolutely 100% believe that the HL7 fire standards is by far, just very similar to what happened in the Open Travel Alliance, is that interoperability is the first step. But we want to remind folks that in the spirit of getting truly 100% data readiness, there's some other steps that we need to take along the way. We believe that the data needs to be aggregated, that there needs to be the ability to bring in multiple sources. We have customers at Innovaccer that have 30 EMRs. You can't take an HL7 record from one EMR and compare it to an HL7 record from another EMR because there's context in those. There's different meaning of that data, and the semantics become incredibly important. Not to mention, each of those systems have a different identity. There's a different MRN, medical record number, whether it's a Cerner system, an Allscripts system, or an Athena system. So someone has to do that aggregation, and we have at Innovaccer have a first attempt at doing that to consolidate those identities, create a common ontology. So if you pull one record, one fire message from one system as the source, it is going to be guaranteed to have the exact same semantics as another record from another system. And so that's the aggregation piece. Second is, to get rid of some of these or eliminate some of these silos, we need to have the ability to hydrate and be able to, the buzzword is kind of data liquidity, that make sure we have the ability that the data can move from a financial system so that it can be consistent with your clinical system, that can be consistent with your supply chain system. So you have to have the ability to hydrate these other legacy type environments because they're not going to go away. Creating a clinical data management environment is not going to replace your cost accounting system, for example. So we need to be able to have that data move from one system to another. Fourth, and perhaps the most important, is the data needs to be activated. We can't have a situation, in our opinion, where you populate the data and then it's up to the end user and the applications to figure out how to activate that information. So the data needs to be put in the format for an API, and then probably most importantly, there needs to be an application environment where people can create applications, source this data, and use it correctly, because use becomes the main part. As you all know, you send the wrong data to a user, to a patient, to a consumer, or even worse, to a clinician, you lose trust. You lose trust in that data, and it muddies the whole system. It takes a very, very long time to gain that trust back. So you need to be able to get this data from the point of aggregation and consolidation and of high quality, and be able to distribute that extremely quickly. And then finally, harmonization. It's not enough these days that you fire and forget. We have plenty of cases where the data, and I'll speak from some of my personal experience, typically there's a black market for data, and the analyst will deal, here I have this file from, some system, and you get it, and you look at it, and heavens knows where it came from, or it's been modified or transformed 5, 6, 7 times. And so you're no longer sure you're using the source. So harmonization is, we need to make sure that it has the lineage and the provenance, and that we can track where it's used. Because the other important thing is we in the healthcare space have a massive, massive pile of data that we need to go through. But we don't have to go through 100% of it, at least not now. Let's take pieces. So you need to understand, in our opinion, where the data is consumed and where it's providing the most value to the end users. And so that harmonization keeps track of that data all the way to the source to know which is the most important. So you can do things, it's the first time in my history as an IT person that I actually deploy a system and then I can find out whether it's being used. Because often fire and forget, and hope everybody does well with it. So that's what the point of harmonization is. I have to flip to another slide here for a second. So I'm going to introduce a little, this is kind of shameless self-promotion here from an Innovaccer standpoint. So what we do is we have a product, we call it the Data Activation Platform. That's that semicircle down in the middle that takes in as much data as we can get our hands on. I mentioned we want to make sure the right data gets to the right people, but in order to do that, we want to have an all-encompassing, wide variety of information coming into our data platform so that we can pick and choose what data gets of high integrity, we check its fidelity, and then what gets passed on. And so on the bottom, we can adjust all this data from all these different sources. Social determinants of health is SDOH. And then we put it in this platform, and what's interesting about this platform, it has two masters it serves. One is on the left-hand side is we have built a number of applications to support business functions, generally population health types functions, patient engagement functions, contact center functions, and those are available and built in our platform. But our platform environment is also open to other developers. It's open to you all as FHIR developers. It's open to partners. We have about 30 partners that build within our environment. And what's interesting about that is once they write an app, or once you write an app with the FHIR, using the FHIR standard, of course it's transportable to all these other systems that are using FHIR as the primary mechanism. So this is kind of the high level architecture of what we have. And then I just want to, since this is a developers conference, whoops. I have a more detailed slide of what that development environment actually looks like. Oh, it's a build slide. So internal to our platform is actually a number of models and a number of persistent stores. And the bottom part of the things that we help manage, this is a product, this is an existing product. It's a bunch of DDLs, a bunch of parsers, a bunch of Kubernetes containers. We are native on the major cloud platforms. And then we install that in your environment or in ours if you want to use our platform. And what we do is we make, on the top level is where we give developers access. It's totally open in all these 6 levels of persistent stores. And there's a number of ways that you can access and use this data. In particular, the one I want to call out, given this is a developers conference, is that we have a function as a service capability. And what this allows is a developer to build an algorithm and then package it up and put it into our API store, which is that little bubble called, in our nomenclature, level 4, but then it enables that for fire, because perhaps version 4 doesn't have all the capabilities you're looking for, and this allows folks to build these. And we have customers that are building their own capabilities in this space. For example, some of the supply chain functions that came up during COVID, they built their own functions and deployed those in level 4. And then we decide whether or not we want to roll it into the product, or if they decide if they want to share it with other customers. So the idea is this is a development environment for folks that are building out capabilities in the healthcare ecosystem. The one thing I will add, Innovaccer is a rapid growing company. We're well beyond the startup phase. We're almost 1,600 employees now. We are close to 400 specific clinical data engineers in our environment, and we are rapidly hiring. So there's a QR code here that leads to our job site. So this is truly shameless self-promotion. But as you all know, finding people that understand the nuances of clinical semantics is a big task. And if you want to join a team that has a lot of people that are making claims and have a genuine interest in helping improving healthcare, through better data management, we'd love to have you join us. So that is the end of my formal presentation. Thank you all for listening, and I'll ask if there's any questions.
If there's any
glad
questions.
to see people taking photos of my QR code.
Yeah. If there's any questions, we can pass around the microphone and ask those questions so the people watching virtually can hear what we're saying.
Thanks. I was curious, what languages do you support in development on your platform?
Programming languages or?
Programming languages.
Oh, good, because our languages are English and Spanish. Right. So most of our development is in Python. And like I say, we put the Python in Kubernetes containers so we can get, the engineers are pretty clever. They've created those containers to be pretty atomic. And so we get massive scale out of those, but it's generally Python. We have some of the data scientists are using R, just because they like it and nobody else can understand it. But that's generally the language. And of course, SQL, in these. So thanks for the question.
And we have one question that came in through Whova. Can we see interoperability, aggregation, hydration, activation, and harmonization as a kind of levels in maturity model for the use of health data?
That's actually quite fabulous. I mean, we're working with a number of the analyst community to try to make this a definition. It doesn't have to be those precise words, but those functions to define data readiness, so at least we know that the interoperability work going on today is the best first step any industry can take, and we're so happy we're doing it. But there's others along the way, because we don't want to, there is a kind of a nightmare scenario where we just move bad data faster, and that's not what any of us want to do. So so we are working with many of the analysts in the healthcare space to help define those terms. And they're not using the exact same terms. Those are the ones we've kind of come up with in our grand thinking, but great question, thank you.
So, any other questions right now? And I don't see any more questions on Whova, so I think
well, thank you all for attending, both in the room and online, and let's all make healthcare great. Thanks.